Dragons once ruled the skies of Westeros, their fire shaping empires and crushing kingdoms. But even the mightiest flames can fade, and in the shadows of ambition and betrayal, House Targaryen teetered on the brink of civil war. This is the story of the Dance of the Dragons. Greetings, Watchers of Westeros. Wherever you are, and whatever time you call your own, step with me into the halls of Dragonstone, where the fire of dragons once burned brighter than the sun. I am your guide through blood, fire, and ambition. The history of House Targaryen as told in House of the Dragon. From the quiet corridors of the Red Keep to the smoke-filled skies above the Stepstones, we will witness power, passion, and peril. A saga that changed the fate of all the Seven Kingdoms. The year was 103 AC, and the Targaryen dynasty was at the height of its power. King Viserys Targaryen ruled the Seven Kingdoms with the calm dignity of a man who understood the delicate balance between power and peace. The dragons soared overhead, symbols of unchallenged authority, their wings casting shadows over the lands they protected and commanded. But beneath the gilded surface of Viserys' reign, the seeds of division were quietly germinating. Viserys had a daughter, Rhaenyra, his chosen heir, and a son of prophecy only in the whispers of those who watched the world carefully. Rhaenyra, a young princess with silver hair and violet eyes, was raised amid the grandeur of Dragonstone, taught the art of governance and the discipline of command. She rode her dragon Syrax with a grace and power that few had ever witnessed, embodying the legacy of her house. Yet, despite the clarity of Viserys' choice, not all accepted a queen on the Iron Throne, and the murmurs of dissent began to ripple through the court. Court life in King's Landing was a tapestry of intrigue, woven from ambition, loyalty, and fear. Noble houses jockeyed for influence, each plotting not only for favor but for survival, aware that a misstep in the king's favor could mean ruin. Sir Otto Hightower, Hand of the King, embodied the careful pragmatism that the realm demanded, but his loyalty was shadowed by his own vision of the future. His daughter, Alicent Hightower, would come to play a role in this looming conflict, her own ambitions entwined with the fate of the Targaryen dynasty. The peace that Viserys had worked to maintain was fragile. The Targaryen dragons, though fearsome and untouchable in their might, could not shield the realm from the human flaws that history had long punished. Rivalries, marriages, and alliances shifted like sand in the wind. The king's health, though not yet failing, became a point of anxiety. Questions of succession, which had been comfortably settled in the mind of the king, became fodder for the ambitious. In the shadows of Dragonstone and the Red Keep, whispers of alternative heirs and secret plots began to stir, and the wheels of a future civil war turned slowly, inexorably. As Viserys aged, the line of succession grew more contested. Rhaenyra's position, though sanctioned by the king, was challenged not openly, but in subtle ways. In courtly suggestions, in the careful positioning of allies, and the silent judgments of lords who saw a female ruler as a potential weakness. Rhaenyra herself was aware of the precariousness of her station, yet she carried herself with a dignity that demanded recognition. Her dragon Syrax was more than a mount. It was a statement of her legitimacy, a living emblem of the Targaryen claim to the throne. Meanwhile, in the distant corners of Westeros, alliances were being forged that would shape the coming conflict. The Velaryons, staunch supporters of Rhaenyra, brought both their fleets and their loyalty, a combination that would prove pivotal in the battles to come. House Hightower, through Alicent, began to consolidate power subtly, seeking influence over the king and the young heirs who might one day sit upon the Iron Throne. Every marriage, every council meeting, every quiet conversation could tip the scales, and those attuned to the pulse of the realm sensed the tension that lay beneath the calm surface. The dragons themselves were both symbols and weapons, their presence a constant reminder of Targaryen supremacy. Each dragon had its temperament, its desires, its dangers, and their riders were bound to them by blood and bond. Rhaenyra's Syrax was proud and fierce, reflecting her own spirit. Prince Daemon Targaryen's Caraxes was equally formidable, a dragon whose loyalty was matched only by its fire. These magnificent creatures cast long shadows over the events of the kingdom, shaping battles and destinies alike. Viserys, aware of the growing undercurrents of tension, sought to maintain peace through counsel and example. He was a king who understood the burdens of leadership, who had inherited the throne in a time when dragons ruled the sky and men ruled the ground. Yet even a wise king cannot forestall the ambitions of those who see opportunity in his absence. As Viserys' health began to falter, the specter of civil war grew ever nearer, a shadow that stretched across the seven kingdoms, promising flames and blood in equal measure. The first fractures appeared not in open conflict, but in subtle shifts of loyalty and whispers in darkened halls. Lords who had pledged fealty to the king began to hedge their bets, contemplating which future would favor their houses. The court, once a stage of ceremonial display, became a battlefield of secrets, each smile hiding intentions sharper than swords. Viserys' trust in his hand, Otto Hightower, and his daughter Alicent became a point of quiet contention as alliances formed and shifted in ways that only history would fully reveal. Amid these tensions, Rhaenyra prepared herself for the inevitable. She was taught not only to rule, but to survive, to navigate the labyrinthine corridors of politics and betrayal. Her dragons were her shield, her companions, and her most potent statement of authority. The young princess understood that her claim to the throne would be challenged not by dragons, but by men, by ambition, and by the complex web of loyalties that defined Westerosi politics. And so, as the years passed, the stage was set. The dance of the dragons, though still unseen by mortal eyes, had already begun in the hearts and minds of those who would seek to claim the throne by fire or by steel. Families, dragons, and kingdoms would soon collide in a war that would leave scars upon the land and the sky, changing the Targaryen dynasty forever. What began as whispers and subtle manipulations would escalate into a maelstrom of fire, blood, and ambition, and the seven kingdoms would be forced to witness the terrible cost of power contested within a single bloodline. Setting the stage for the succession crisis, early plots, and the mounting tension leading directly into the dance of the dragons. The death of King Viserys Targaryen marked the turning of a page that no hand could undo. The realm had long awaited the peaceful succession of his chosen heir, Princess Rhaenyra, the firstborn and the daughter he had named his successor. But in the shadowed corridors of King's Landing, ambition took root in hearts both noble and calculating. Lords whispered, alliances shifted, and the very foundations of the Targaryen legacy trembled. Viserys' passing was sudden yet inevitable, and the funeral rites were a study in both reverence and treachery. In Dragonstone, Rhaenyra prepared to journey south, her dragon Syrax coiled beneath her like a living guardian. She bore not only the weight of her father's crown, but also the expectation of a realm that had never seen a queen on the Iron Throne. The city itself seemed to hold its breath as banners of House Targaryen flapped in the wind, dragons circling the skies, a final salute to the ruler who had sought to maintain balance in a world defined by ambition. But peace was an illusion. Across the narrow sea and within the Red Keep itself, schemers moved with precision. Alicent Hightower, the late king's queen, and her supporters rallied around her son, Aegon, whose claim was born of both ambition and the belief that a male ruler was the only way to secure stability. Their machinations were subtle, yet deliberate. A gathering of allies, the subtle positioning of knights, and the quiet persuasion of key lords who feared the consequences of a woman on the throne. Rhaenyra's arrival in King's Landing was met with both reverence and hostility. The streets were lined with banners proclaiming the legitimacy of the new queen, yet behind the smiles and ceremonial bows lurked unease. The Great Council had sworn to uphold her claim, yet the fragility of oaths in the Seven Kingdoms was well known. The stage was set not for celebration, but for confrontation. In the Red Keep, the confrontation of ideals became tangible. The High Towers, with Alicent at their helm, presented themselves as defenders of tradition, guardians of the realm against perceived instability. Meanwhile, Rhaenyra's supporters, including her uncle Prince Daemon Targaryen, moved with urgency, knowing that the slightest delay could tip the balance irreversibly. The tension was a living thing, crackling in the halls like static before a storm, a prelude to the fire that would soon engulf the kingdom. The first spark of civil war ignited in the coronation itself. While Rhaenyra was proclaimed queen by the loyalists, Aegon was crowned in secret by his supporters, a shadow of legitimacy that challenged her rule before it could fully take hold. The dual claims fractured the realm almost instantly, and what had been whispers in the court became open declarations of allegiance. Noble houses chose sides, fleets were readied, and dragons, magnificent and terrifying, took to the skies in silent watch, their loyalty an extension of the ambitions of their riders. Rhaenyra, now a queen in title and in spirit, found herself constrained not only by political opposition, but by the practicalities of war. Her first challenge was to secure support from the lords, who had pledged fealty, yet hesitated at the prospect of open conflict. Among them, the Velaryons proved indispensable. Their fleet, unmatched in skill and reach, became both sword and shield, a vital instrument in the campaign to assert her claim. Prince Daemon, fierce and uncompromising, acted as both advisor and enforcer, his own dragon Caraxes a symbol of terror to those who might oppose them. The early battles were characterized by both cunning and carnage. Skirmishes along the coasts, surprise attacks on key fortresses, and the deadly dance of dragon against dragon demonstrated the terrifying power that had once secured the Targaryen dominance of Westeros. Aegon II's forces, loyal and determined, countered with equal ferocity, their dragons creating firestorms that scarred the landscape. It was a war unlike any the Seven Kingdoms had known in living memory. Not merely armies clashing, but titanic beasts reshaping the battlefield with wings and flame. Intrigue continued even amid battle. Messages carried in secret, alliances tested by fear and greed, and betrayals that turned friends into foes within the span of a single day. Rhaenyra's council was a microcosm of the realm at large. Strategic minds, fierce loyalties, and the ever-present shadow of treachery. Every decision bore consequences that rippled across the kingdom, and the Queen's judgment was tested not only in the field, but in the quiet rooms where whispers could be as lethal as a dragon's fire. One of the pivotal early confrontations occurred at the skies above the stepstones. Dragons clashed in fiery combat, their roars echoing like thunder over the waves. Caraxes, relentless and merciless, tore through enemy lines, while Syrax, agile and cunning, matched her father's teachings in the art of survival and supremacy. These battles were not just spectacles of destruction. They were defining moments in the war, shaping perceptions, testing loyalties, and deciding the fates of those who would live to fight another day. Meanwhile, in King's Landing, the struggle for political dominance intensified. Aegon's coronation emboldened his supporters, while Rhaenyra's presence demanded loyalty from those who had pledged it. The city became a stage for subterfuge, poisonings, and clandestine meetings, each move designed to tilt the balance in an otherwise precarious situation. The capital, a place of both governance and danger, reflected the war's chaos even when dragons were not in sight, and the everyday lives of citizens were caught between allegiance and survival. Amid the fire and strategy, personal rivalries and familial betrayals fueled the conflict as much as military might. The bond between Rhaenyra and her son, Joffrey, was tested by the necessities of leadership. Daemon's ambitions often skirted the boundaries of loyalty, and Alicent's protective instincts toward her children hardened into a determination that made compromise impossible. These human elements, fear, love, pride, and vengeance, were as potent as the flames that dragons spewed across the battlefield, reminding all that the war was waged not just by beasts, but by the hearts of men and women. By the end of these early campaigns, the dance of the dragons had fully begun. Westeros was no longer a realm of peace and prosperity, but a theater of devastation, where every decision could result in death, and every victory came at an unbearable cost. Dragons lit the skies with fire, lords betrayed or were betrayed, and the line between right and wrong blurred in the pursuit of survival and power. The war was no longer about crowns or claims. It was about existence, legacy, and the ability of House Targaryen to endure in a world that now threatened to consume it entirely. The dual coronations, the first battles, and the high-stakes tension between Rhaenyra and Aegon. The war is now fully ignited, dragons dominating the skies, and Westeros descending into chaos. The Dance of the Dragons, once a simmering feud of whispers and political maneuvering, had now erupted into a war that would scar the Seven Kingdoms forever. Westeros, a land accustomed to the rise and fall of kings, had never witnessed a conflict where dragons themselves became weapons of mass destruction, their fire turning skies into battlefields and cities into ruins. The flames of ambition now illuminated the true cost of dynastic strife. The war began in earnest with battles that combined cunning strategy, raw ferocity, and the devastating presence of dragons. One of the earliest and most consequential clashes occurred near the city of Harrenhal, a fortress whose shadowed walls had witnessed centuries of history. Rhaenyra's forces, led by Prince Daemon and her loyal commanders, moved swiftly, attempting to secure key territories and rally lords to her cause. The dragons, Syrax and Caraxes, cut through the air with lethal precision, burning enemy soldiers and striking terror into those who dared oppose the queen. Aegon's supporters, however, were equally formidable. Their dragons, wild and deadly, engaged in aerial duels that set the horizon ablaze. Each encounter was a ballet of destruction, tails smashing into towers, fire raining down like molten rain, and the screams of men drowned beneath the roars of dragons. Every flight carried the weight of strategy. Every landing risked ambush or betrayal. The human cost of these encounters was staggering, yet even more terrifying was the unpredictability of the dragons themselves. These creatures were not mere instruments of war. They were beings of power, intelligence, and temperament, whose loyalty could shift the tide of battle in a single moment. In the midst of these confrontations, alliances shifted unpredictably. Noble houses, their loyalty tested, weighed the cost of supporting Rhaenyra against the potential rewards of siding with Aegon. The Velaryons remained steadfast, their naval strength critical in supplying and reinforcing Rhaenyra's campaign, while other houses wavered, driven by fear, pragmatism, or greed. The political chessboard of Westeros expanded to include both men and dragons, each move carrying the weight of life, death, and legacy. The war's human toll was matched only by its impact on the dragons themselves. One by one, these majestic beasts fell in combat, their deaths a stark reminder of the perils of power. The skies, once alive with dragonfire, began to dim as the war claimed the lives of creatures whose very existence had defined the Targaryen dynasty. Battles like the one over the God's Eye, where dragons clashed above the waters with terrifying intensity, demonstrated both the skill of their riders and the fragility of life when fire met fire. Each loss sent shockwaves through the realm, demoralizing some and heartening the resolve of others. Personal tragedies compounded the chaos. Rhaenyra faced the horrors of betrayal not only from enemies, but from those she had trusted. Lords who once swore fealty shifted allegiances, and even within her family, divisions deepened. The death of allies in battle, the loss of dragons, and the constant threat of assassination weighed heavily upon her, shaping the decisions she would make and the ruthlessness she would sometimes embrace. Her determination to claim her birthright became intertwined with grief, anger, and the relentless drive to survive in a war that showed no mercy. Meanwhile, Aegon's forces capitalized on every opportunity to destabilize Rhaenyra's position. Assassination attempts, strategic occupations of key strongholds, and coordinated attacks sought to weaken her claim at its foundation. Yet for every blow struck, Rhaenyra and her commanders adapted, relying on their knowledge of Westeros, the loyalty of key allies, and the unmatched power of their dragons. The war became a series of titanic gambits, each more daring and dangerous than the last. A deadly game played across the land and the skies. One of the pivotal moments of the conflict was the battle at Dragonstone. The island fortress, ancestral home to House Targaryen, became a crucible of strategy and fire. Dragons clashed overhead, their riders maneuvering with a combination of courage and desperation. The castle's walls, though strong, could not withstand the fury of dragons, and the defenders fought not only against armies, but against the very elements of destruction unleashed from above. In these moments, the true horror of the Dance of the Dragons became evident. The war was not simply political. It was elemental, a collision of ambition and primal power that reshaped the landscape of Westeros. Amid these grand battles, smaller skirmishes and personal duels also defined the war. Knights and lords, though overshadowed by dragons, played critical roles, executing plans that could turn the tide. Poisonings, ambushes, and acts of espionage were as lethal as sword and flame. The complexity of the conflict demanded both strategic genius and ruthless pragmatism. Leaders learned, often at terrible cost, that a single miscalculation could result in death, the loss of a dragon, or the collapse of an entire campaign. Tragedy struck not only through combat, but through circumstance. Rhaenyra's family endured unbearable losses, her children threatened by illness, war, and betrayal. Each death was a wound that fueled her resolve, a reminder that the cost of power was measured not only in territory or dragons, but in the lives of those she loved. The emotional weight of leadership pressed upon her, shaping a queen who was both formidable and haunted, a woman who embodied both the fire of her lineage and the sorrow of endless loss. The turning points of the Dance of the Dragons were as brutal as they were decisive. Battles that seemed lost were sometimes won through cunning or courage. Victories were often hollow, leaving destruction in their wake. The war reshaped Westeros, leaving scars upon the land, its people, and the dragons themselves. By now, the realm had witnessed the death of multiple dragons, each loss a symbol of the diminishing power of House Targaryen. The majesty of dragonkind, once the cornerstone of Targaryen dominance, was eroding, leaving only the memory of fire and the relentless ambition of those who survived. As the war continued, it became clear that the Dance of the Dragons was not merely a struggle for the Iron Throne. It was a crucible that tested every aspect of Targaryen identity: loyalty, courage, wisdom, and the unbreakable bond between dragon and rider. The choices of Rhaenyra, Daemon, Aegon, and their allies would reverberate for generations, defining not only the outcome of the Civil War, but the very future of dragons in Westeros. Westeros is now a kingdom engulfed in fire and ambition, with the end of the war approaching, but the outcome still uncertain. The final chapters of the Dance of the Dragons unfolded in a maelstrom of fire, betrayal, and heartbreak. Westeros, already scarred by years of dragonfire and bloodshed, teetered on the edge of ruin. The war that had begun as a dispute over succession had become a nightmare of destruction, claiming the lives of dragons, nobles, and innocents alike, leaving the Targaryen dynasty forever changed. Rhaenyra Targaryen, once the unchallenged heir of Viserys, faced the cruel reality of war. Her forces, though loyal and fierce, were gradually eroded by attrition, strategic setbacks, and the merciless precision of Aegon's supporters. Every victory came with a price, every gain tempered by loss. Dragons that had once symbolized the unassailable power of House Targaryen now fell one by one, victims of aerial duels, fire, and treachery. Syrax, her beloved dragon, remained by her side, but even this bond could not shield her from the grim inevitability of human ambition. The turning point came when betrayal struck from within. Lords who had pledged fealty wavered, their allegiances swayed by fear, greed, or the promise of survival. The Targaryen family, fractured by ambition and mistrust, became both victim and instrument of its own downfall. Rhaenyra was eventually captured, her forces broken and scattered, leaving her isolated amidst the ruins of a war that had consumed all she had fought to protect. Her execution was a moment of profound tragedy, a dark testament to the brutal realities of power in Westeros. Rhaenyra's death was not merely the end of a claimant. It was the extinguishing of hope for a future where a queen could rule unchallenged. Yet, even in death, her legacy endured. Through her surviving children, the scars of battle, and the memory of dragons whose fire had once ruled the skies. The realm mourned, feared, and remembered, for the flames of her life would not be easily forgotten. Aegon, whose claim had been secured through ambition and treachery, found his reign as fragile as it had been hard-won. The costs of war weighed heavily upon him, his rule shadowed by the devastation left in the wake of the Dance of the Dragons. Dragons, once abundant and mighty, were now few, their numbers decimated by the relentless conflict. The skies over Westeros were quieter. The terror of dragonfire diminished, leaving a world forever altered. Aegon himself would meet an untimely death, poisoned and betrayed, the last of his kind in the struggle that had defined an era. The aftermath of the Dance of the Dragons was a kingdom struggling to rebuild. The Targaryen dynasty, though not extinguished, had been irrevocably weakened. Dragons, the cornerstone of their power, had been reduced to near extinction. Noble houses, though victorious or spared, bore the scars of war in their lands, their treasuries, and their memories. Westeros, a continent once ruled from the Iron Throne with the unquestioned supremacy of dragonfire, now faced a future of caution, diplomacy, and fragile alliances. Yet from the ashes of devastation came lessons that would endure for generations. The Dance of the Dragons revealed the limits of power, the consequences of ambition unchecked, and the fragile nature of loyalty. Kings and queens, lords and ladies, dragons and men, all were reminded that even the mightiest flames could be snuffed out. And that legacy is built not only on conquest, but on wisdom, restraint, and the courage to act justly. For Rhaenyra and her children, the fire of House Targaryen continued, tempered by grief and experience. Their survival ensured that the Targaryen line would continue, even as dragons faded from the skies. The extinction of many dragons marked not only the end of an era, but also the beginning of a new chapter in Westeros where power would still be contested, but the methods and the consequences would forever bear the scars of the past. And so, as we look back upon the Dance of the Dragons, we witness a story of fire and blood, of ambition and heartbreak, of the fragility and the ferocity of life in Westeros. The history of House Targaryen, as portrayed in House of the Dragon, is a saga of extremes. The heights of power, the depths of treachery, and the ultimate cost of a dynasty ruled by both human desire and dragon fire. Dragons are gone, but their legacy remains etched into the skies and stone of Westeros. The Dance of the Dragons reminds us that even the mightiest can fall, and that history is written in fire and blood. If you've traveled with us through this saga, strike the bell like a dragon's roar, and pledge your loyalty by liking, commenting, and subscribing. Join us again, where the past and the stories of Westeros come alive, because history, after all, is never just written. It's lived. Fly high, watchers of Westeros, until our next journey through the annals of fire and legacy.